All right. Today we're going to work with logo animation or graphic animation. We're going to work with keyframes. We're going to go back into Cinema 4D and work with the logos that you made at the beginning of the year when we first looked at Cinema 4D. And we're going to try and make, I don't know if anybody was at the football game Friday, but if you were, you may have seen for the instant replays this graphic or this logo animation right before they would go to replay. And we're going to learn how to make something like that. The reason it looks, not very good here is because there's no background behind this. So this is all just black. And since the outline of the Salem logo is black, it looks terrible. But that's what we're going to try and recreate. So the first thing that you need to do is open up your logo. And I'm just going to save this really quickly. We'll see if it's something different. Okay. So you need to go to After Effects and hit File, New, Maxon Cinema 4D. And then right here, you're just going to hit Saved for Untitled. You don't want to find your logo from this page. You just want to hit Save. And it'll say, do you want to replace this? Maybe it might say this. If it doesn't, it's no big deal. Just hit Yes. Okay, and now we're going to open up our logo from Cinema 4D rather than After Effects. So File, Open. There's my Salem logo. Okay. Now there's no animation or anything. I can spin this around and look at it, but there's no animation yet. If I hit play, it's not doing anything. So if you look at your logo, I don't know how many parts you have to your logo. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 splines that I extruded. And I want to put them all in a group so they move individually. Like if I click on the S, I can move that S separately. I'm just going to Control Z that. I don't want that to happen. I want to move the whole thing. So the first thing you're going to do, and hopefully your logo looks like this, where you have all of your individual parts extruded, and you should have them labeled. See, I have mine labeled here. And I have a material on all of them, which you create down here. You're going to want a mouse for this. So if you don't have a mouse, I suggest getting one right now. If you're not to this point yet, go back and watch the first video on Cinema 4D in the classroom and get to this point with some sort of logo. Okay? All right, so now what you want to do is highlight all of these extrudes, however many you have. You can just click down at the bottom and drag up to highlight all of them. And then you're going to right click over one of the layers and go to Group Objects. And it's going to create a null. And if I click on the word null and hit enter, I can rename it. I'm just going to call it logo. Okay. Now what we want to do is kind of set this scene. Right now, if I render this out by hitting this button up here, again, it might take a little while because I'm doing this in full HD, 1920 by 1080. But you can see the red looks like really washed out, and you can't even see the outline because there's no background here. And that's what I want. I don't want to work with a background because I just want the logo animation to play over top of video. Right now, you might want a background, and we can work with creating like never-ending or endless backgrounds later. But for now, we don't need a background. But we do want to change the way this is lit because this looks really bad. So if I click here, if I move it, see how the color changes? Like right dead on, it's just washed out, and here it's like a brighter, richer color. If I render that out. The reason is, by default, Cinema 4D just gives you like this generic light, and it's kind of like just coming from all sides. It's just, it's generic, and we don't want that. So we're going to add some lights here. So I'm going to center the subject up by rotating it, and then I'll probably pull back a little bit. Alright, so it's in the middle of my scene. The first thing I'm going to do before I bring in lights, so I can see where I'm putting these lights, is add a camera. So you just click and hold on camera. I don't want a target camera or a stereo camera. We can talk about those later. I just want a regular camera. So there, I drop a camera into the scene, and you can see now this is the perspective from the camera, but you can see I'm not in the camera yet. Okay, you see the outline here. I'm not looking at it through the camera. I'm setting where the camera is going to be. So I can move this around. And wherever I stop, that's where I can set where the camera is going to be. So I'm going to go right here. And if I hit this button right here, click on that, now I've set the camera. So now anytime I move the screen, I'm moving the camera. When this button is highlighted, I'm moving the when I move these controls, I'm moving the camera. Okay, it's very important to remember that. So you can jump in and out of the camera, which is what we're going to do a bunch. And it's just important to remember that when this light, or when this button is, when you're clicked on this button, you are in the camera view. So any movement you make will move the camera. So there's a whole bunch of options down here with the cameras. I'm just going to keep a classic camera. You can get a super wide camera, a telephoto, a portrait camera, all these different lenses. I'm just going to keep it for right now, standard classic 36mm camera. Okay, we're not even going to mess with any of that stuff right now. Okay, so I have a camera. So now, just to show you, if I uncheck this, I'm outside of the camera, and now I can move around the scene. You can see my camera's there, and that's the view that it has, and I can move around this scene here. But if I want to jump back into the camera view, I can just click on that button, and it'll take me back to what the camera's seeing. Okay, so let's add some lights now, because again, you can see how washed out this color is. So I'm going to jump out of the camera, and just like we talked about at the beginning of the year with 3-point lighting, we are going to do that here. So I'm going to add a light. Click and hold on this light bulb here. There's a bunch of different lights you can get. I'm just going to use a regular light bulb. And now I'm going to move this. This is going to be our key light. So off to the side. It's the main light right there. Now there's a whole bunch of options with lights, including intensity. I'm going to keep the key light high, like at 90. And I'm going to drop another light into the scene. Before I do that though, I'm going to click on this light, hit enter, and rename this key light. Okay, now I'm going to drop another light into the scene. This is going to be less intense light. Be farther back here. And we'll bring it up. And we're going to drop this down to like 55, something like that. Okay, and then if I hit enter, this is going to be the fill light. And then if you remember 3-point lighting, we need one more light. Drop another light in there, and I'm just going to bring it straight up and back. So you can see now I just want to highlight. See how if I bring it way far back, it's not really doing anything. I'm going to put it right over top. And this is going to be the hair light. All right. And you can even mess with the colors. Like if I wanted to make a tint to this light, you can see how it's changing there. It's like giving it like a blue tint to the light, so you can do that if you want, but I'm just going to keep mine standard white. And then I'm going to highlight all these lights. I'm going to lasso all these lights. Right click on one of the lights and hit group object. That's going to create a group or a null. I'm going to hit enter and just rename these lights. Okay, so now I got my camera and my lights. If I jump back into the camera view and render this out, can see the colors a little bit better. It's not washed out as much, just because the scene's properly lit. Okay. All right, so now what we want to do is animate this thing. We want to animate this logo to get something like this. Something like that. Okay. So how do we do that? First thing up, so right now the scene is set for 90 frames. That's 3 seconds because we're at 30 frames per second. I can make that bigger, or longer, I should say, right here. If I wanted to make the time longer, I can just increase this, and then to see the entire scene, I would grab the end of this and drag it out. 206 frames. We're going to stay at 90 frames. 3 seconds, we probably won't even use all 3 seconds of it, but you can see the playhead here at 0. So let's talk about keyframes. Keyframing in any of the Adobe applications, anything that has a stopwatch by it, you can keyframe, meaning you can animate whatever has a stopwatch by it. But in Cinema 4D, it's just a little bit different the way you keyframe. So you can keyframe the camera to move, the lights to move. We're going to keyframe just the logo here. So the camera and the lights are going to stay stationary, and we're just going to get the movement of the logo. Okay, so what we want to do is we want this logo to start off camera, fly on camera, and then fly out, right? So it looks like this. Starts off, comes on, flies out, right? That's what we're after. So I'm going to jump out of the camera right now and get a view where I can see the camera and the logo. Okay, so at 0 frames, meaning at the very beginning, I don't want this logo to be here, so I'm going to move it. But before I move it, let's just move it. Okay, so what I want, if I grab a hold of this blue handle, click and drag it through the camera, and then I want to click on, make sure that logo is highlighted. It should be because I just moved it. Click on coordinates. So logo's highlighted, coordinates, and I'm just going to click all of these right here, these 6. So this is dealing with where it's located in space, like the x-axis, the y, and the z, and then the rotation of it, up and down, left and right, side to side. Okay, so I've set a keyframe by clicking all those. And now, if I move it to like 30 frames, that's 1 second. Watch what happens to this when I move the logo now. If I move it back here, you can see I've only changed one of these parameters, I guess you would call them, so it becomes yellow. So if now I would have to click this again, and I've set a keyframe. So now you can see there's movement. If I take the playhead back to the beginning and hit play, that's the movement I get. It takes 1 second to get from here to here. Okay, if I jump back in my camera, this is what it looks like. Pretty lame, right? I mean, it's cool, but it's just a straight movement. So we kind of don't want that. So what we're going to do, this is fine. We can keep it. We can keep this keyframe at 30 seconds, but let's change this first one. So I'm going to jump out of the camera, and I'm going to move with the playhead on 0 now, because if the playhead was here and I started messing with where it would set another keyframe. We just want these 2 right now. So playhead's at 0. I'm going to move this over to the left and up, and then I'm going to click on this rotation tool up here to rotate the logo, and I'm going to rotate it, I don't know, like 70 degrees, and then maybe on the blue axis I'm going to rotate it like that, and then I'm going to click back on the move tool, and now back to logo, and you can see all of these different parameters that I've changed now. So I'm going to click those again to set this keyframe. And it even changed, I'm not sure why. I'm not sure why, but it changed this keyframe as well, which we don't want. So, I'm going to change the rotation here back to 0, 0. And I'm going to move this over, down. I'm going to jump in the camera to see where, right there, right. So now we can see the animation. It's kind of flying in and spinning at the same time, which is just a cooler looking animation, right? If I jump in the camera, we can see that looks a little bit cooler than just coming straight through. There's some movement there. And also for me, it's a little slow, right? Like, it takes a while. So I'm going to move this back to, by the way, you can move these keyframes around by just clicking, holding, and dragging them somewhere on the timeline, right? Like if I drag it out to 60, now that would take 2 seconds for that animation to happen. I want it to happen quicker, so I'm going to drag it back to 20. It's a little bit better. By the way, you can see it automatically, Cinema 4D automatically like eases these keyframes, meaning it starts fast and like slows into the animation. You can see when I play it, like it starts coming past the camera really quickly and kind of slides into it. All right, so we've got that animation done. Now what I want to do, if we look here, I didn't do a great job of this on this one. You can see how before it gets to its first position and then kind of pulls back a little bit before it flies out. So that's what we want to do here. So what I want to do, instead of, if I just set if I went down to like 40, right, and set a keyframe, if I move this, I'm going to jump out of the camera, so I have a different angle, and I moved it back, and I rotated it a little bit, like that, and then set another keyframe. It's not going to be what I want. I'll show you why. Jump back in the camera. So here's what we got. I'm going to take the playhead back to the beginning. See how it's just one continuous motion, right? Like it never stops. In this animation, we have it kind of, oh gosh, not playing for some reason. See how it stops there for a second before it moves, stops, goes back. That's what we're after. I think it just looks better that way. And if I just set those two keyframes, as soon as it gets to this point, there's nothing telling it to stop for a minute. It's going from here and then moving back here. Okay, don't want that. So I'm going to delete this keyframe just by highlighting it, clicking on it, so it turns yellow, and hitting backspace. So now we're back to this animation here. All right, so what I'm going to do, from 20 frames to, let's say 30 frames, I don't want it to move. I want it to stay right there. So to do that, click on logo, back to coordinates, and I'm just going to click all of these again. I'm just creating a hold keyframe, basically. See how there's no movement there. So now from 30 to, let's say, 50? Nah, 45. I'm going to have it rear back before it flies out of the screen. So I'm going to jump out of the camera. And let's see, I'm going to pull it back and click on the rotate tool. Maybe I'll rotate it that way and down a little bit. Okay, let's see what that looks like. Back on logo, and I'm just changing these parameters. Jump back in the camera. Let's see what that looks like. Yep, that's cool. I still think the beginning animation is a little slow for me, so I'm going to take that keyframe, put it at 17 maybe. Okay, cool. So now what we gotta do is have it fly off camera there. So from 45, let's say 60. I'm gonna have it fly off real fast. Once again, jumping out of the camera, and I'm gonna hit on the rotate tool first and rotate it up and maybe over to the right like that, and then I'm just gonna pull it, go back to the move tool. I'm gonna pull it straight through. Actually, we're gonna move it over a little bit and through like that. And we'll go back to coordinates, and you can see I've changed all 6 of those parameters, so just have to make sure I click on all of them. Alright, I'm gonna jump back in the camera, see what it looks like. Oh, I hate it. Hate it. So I'm gonna make sure my playhead is over 60, and I'm just gonna jump out of the camera, and I'm gonna move it down and over, and then adjust those keyframes. Back in the camera, let's see if that made it any better. Better. So I think when it gets to here, I'm just going to move it up and over to the right a little bit. So make sure the playhead's on 60, jump out of the camera, up, over, and I'm going to rotate it a little more. So I'm going to hit the rotate button, and we're going to rotate it to like there. Alright, click on logo, and make sure I make these changes. Back in the camera. Let's see. Cool. I like it. I like it. Now you can see, if I render this out, this is going to be a little dark here. Probably. So what I can do is just, if I jump out of the camera and open up these lights, this light group, and the fill light, move the fill light back a little bit. So there's a little more light there. Okay, back in the camera. Watch it again. I kind of wanted this thing to pull back a little bit farther and rotate a little bit more. So, logo, so I bring up the keyframes. I'm going to jump out of the camera. I'm going to go over here. I'll pull back a little bit more and rotate a little bit more. And then change those keyframes. See what that looks like. That's cool. I kind of want more rotation on the screen, so on camera too. So what I'm going to do is go back to 0, jump out of the camera, come back here so I can see this thing, and maybe rotate it a little bit more, like that. Maybe that'll work. Maybe. Camera, play. That's cool. By the way, I can't stand when it gets to here. I don't like that. I want it. It's a little off, huh? That's all right. We're gonna leave it. The top of this isn't level. That's okay. Cool. Coolio. All right, there's my animation. So I like it. I like it. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna save this. So file. I'm gonna keep the file saved as just Salem logo, and I'm gonna save this as a different name. So file save as, and I'm gonna call this logo animation. Hit save. Now I'm gonna go back to After Effects. I can delete these two things. So I have a new project in After Effects, and then right here in my project panel, I'm gonna double click, and I'm gonna find the logo animation, which is, I'm not sure where you saved yours, but mine should be right here. Where is it? Desktop? Oh man. Logo reveal. Oh, here it is. Logo animation. So I'm going to bring in my logo animation. Okay. Now, here's how you save it. I'm just going to drag this down to a new composition. You know what? Well, okay. Drag this down to a new composition. And it's going to drop it in there with a view, the view of like this view here. That view, rather than this final like rendered out nice looking view, which is what we want. That looks washed out still, but okay. So to change that, right here in the Cinema 4D like options, I'm just gonna go to the renderer and change it from software to final, and you can see it working here. And now there's nothing but a checkerboard because we have no background, right? So there's no background, which is what we want. If I took the playhead out to 1 second, it's trying to render that one frame. By the way, you're not going to be able to hit the spacebar and have it play through. So there you go. You can see there's no background behind it, which is kind of what we're after. But if I hit the spacebar for it to play through, it's going to take a long time to get through there because there's so much information. It's 3D, like HD, high res quality. So it's not going to be able to play smoothly. So don't even try it, really. I just hit the spacebar to stop it there. See, I have one. That's how much time it took for one frame to render. All right. So if I go back to Cinema 4D, this is not in the middle, I guess. By the way, now any change that I make, like let's say I made a change to the camera, right? Like I'm in the camera and I want the camera to like move slightly there. Like I just rotated it a little bit and then I hit File, Save. It's going to automatically update. See how it's updating these changes in After Effects. So any change then you make to Cinema 4D file, it'll update automatically in After Effects here. All right. So the only thing I'm going to change, I would spend more time on this if this was just, you know, my personal project, but for the sake of saving time, the only thing I'm going to change is how many frames there are. Because our animation is done in like, I don't know, 56 frames, I'm just going to set it to 60. So I'm going to take the frames from 90 down to 60. And then drag that out. And there we go. Because it takes so long for it to render. Oh, and then if I hit save, go back, now you can see it shortened that. So I can drag this in and I can drag this in. All right, now all you have to do is render this. So you're going to just go to composition, add to render queue. Now, this is very important. When I save this, I don't want there to be a background. I want it to be able to go on top of video. So you're going to hit the word lossless here in your render queue. And I'm going to change the video output from RGB, which is the red, green, blue channels, which is the standard way to change color in video and that kind of thing. And I want it to include the alpha channel. The alpha channel is just this checkerboard kind of thing. That means that there's no background there. So we want to change the video output from RGB to RGB plus alpha. Hit OK. I'm going to call it, click on this word here, logo animation. I'm going to call it logo animation. That's fine. And then I choose where I want to save it. And we can save it right here. That's fine. Hit save. And then I just hit render. And now it's going to go through frame by frame. You can see the frames where the logo is not on screen. It's going to go pretty quickly. But once you start getting this 3D object here on the screen, it's going to take a lot of time. So this might take, I don't know, an hour, 45 minutes maybe to render. You can see here, now it's going to go frame by frame with the logo flying in, and it has to process each frame and all that information. So when you're done with this, we will throw it in on top of some video in Premiere and see what it looks like. But that's all you have to do for now. All right, let me know if you have questions.